Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a project many of you have heard about, maybe even been curious about. But it's facing a real reckoning now, the Pi network. And look, this isn't just about the usual market ups and downs or slow progress. We're talking about a severe, maybe even existential crisis of internal trust.
That's exactly right. And our mission today is, well, pretty laser focused. We've got our hands on official court documents, actual legal filings, and they reveal some really startling allegations. Financial misuse is a big one, specifically around $20 million in early funding. Plus, just shocking details about failures and how the whole thing was run internally.
Yeah.
And this deep dive, it's really your shortcut to understanding what exactly went wrong behind the scenes, for one of crypto's most hyped projects.
Right. And to really set the stage here, we're looking at the fallout from a lawsuit filed back in 2020. This wasn't just anyone. It was filed by the former co-founder, Vincent McPhillip. And it was filed directly against the current core leadership, the other co-founders, Dr. Nicholas Tsoukalos and Dr. Cheng Yao-Fan. Just for the record, the case number is 20CV368601, Santa Clara Superior Court. And honestly, the details that emerge, less cool, decentralized future, much more corporate meltdown.
Yeah, let's jump right into the money part, the core financial allegation. The lawsuit claims that $20 million in funding was secured. This was through Safety Investments between 2019 and 2020. But here's the critical part. The company's valuation at that time was also set at $20 million.
Hang on a sec. They raised $20 million when the total valuation was $20 million. Doesn't that essentially mean those first investors kind of bought like 100% of the company's theoretical value right off the bat? That feels like an immediate red flag just structurally.
Precisely. Yeah, that's a huge point. Safe investments, simple agreement for future equity. They're common, sure. They give investors shares later on. But the claim here is that this big chunk of money, which was supposed to, build a complete ecosystem, well, it was allegedly misused. And you can see the reaction in the community. There was this one popular member, Mr. Spock, who basically said, look, with that cash, the core team could have built like 100 apps by 2020. But instead, the feeling was they, quote, hid it from us and investors. It just points to this immediate lack of transparency around vital funds.
Okay, so misusing funds is obviously bad. But what the documents apparently show about the actual working environment, I mean, that's maybe even more staggering. This wasn't just a disagreement about money, was it? It sounds like a total governance disaster.
Oh, absolutely. The documents, they paint this picture of a, quote, toxic working environment. And maybe the most surprising bit is the allegation that Tsoukalos and Fan, who were married, by the way, they allegedly brought their marital problems to the workplace.
Yeah.
And this chaos reportedly showed up as, well, not just shouting and threats, but horrifyingly as physical confrontations.
Physical confrontations, seriously. In the workplace of a major crypto project. That's just a catastrophic failure of professional conduct.
It's shocking, right? And that level of internal hostility doesn't just wreck morale. It makes it almost impossible for leadership to focus on building anything or meeting promises to investors.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And beyond that, sort of, personal chaos,
Right.
there was also this really aggressive corporate move to sideline McPhillip, wasn't there?
Yes, exactly. McPhillip accused the leadership of trying to forcefully dilute his shares. The filings detail this alleged plan to issue brand new stock for an almost unbelievable price, just 0.00005 per piece, 5 zeros after the decimal point.
Wow. 0.405 per share.
Yeah. I mean, to put that in perspective, it's such an aggressive, calculated move. It looks like an attempt to just crater the value of a co-founder's initial stake, make it almost worthless. It really shows how adversarial things got internally, how much it became about control.
So after all of that, the alleged money issues, the toxic environment, the attempt to dilute shares, where did the lawsuit end up? What's the status now?
Well, the dispute itself was officially resolved. It happened confidentially back in July 2023, and Vincent McPhillip is no longer involved with the project at all. But here's the thing. While the legal case might be closed, the damage to the project's reputation, that's probably permanent. Settling a lawsuit doesn't just erase the documented evidence of all that internal failure and the trust crisis it created.
Right. And that link, that connection between the internal chaos and the market collapse, that's what we need to look at next. We've covered the alleged problems inside the company, but what happens when that dysfunction leaks out and, hits the actual numbers? What was the real-world damage to the token's market value?
Well, the financial fallout has been absolutely devastating for Pi. The coin just collapsed. It dropped somewhere between 80% and 85%. just during 2025 alone. And crucially, this massive drop pushed Picoin out of the top 50 cryptocurrencies for the first time since, well, since the idea was even launched.
Out of the top 50, that's a significant fall from grace.
It is. The price just cratered from its peak. Now it's hovering in this incredibly low range, like $0.25 to 27 cents. We're literally talking about billions of dollars wiped off the market capitalization. Billions.
Those numbers are just brutal.
Yeah.
But it feels like the loss of faith, the loss of trust, might be even deeper than the price drop itself. I mean, this project built its whole identity on its community, and now that community seems to be losing confidence fast.
Absolutely. The data we're seeing shows that 50%, half of Picoin holders, their own community, now expect the project to completely collapse by 2026. It's not just, external skepticism. That's pessimism from within. And yeah, externally, the skepticism has hardened into outright hostility. You had the CEO of Bybit, a major global exchange, publicly call the Pi network a scam.
A scam. Wow. That's strong language from an exchange CEO. And what about the regulators? They don't seem too happy either.
No, that's a massive risk factor hanging over them. Authorities in China specifically flagged the project as a pyramid scheme way back in 2023. And our source suggests that something like 90% of experts globally are putting out serious warnings about potential losses for investors. I mean, when a major government explicitly calls you a pyramid scheme, it does serious damage to your legitimacy and any hope of future regulatory approval.
Yeah, definitely. Which kind of brings us to maybe the biggest paradox surrounding Pi Network, the thing that really highlights this huge gap between the founder's vision and, well, market reality.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the global consensus value, the GCV.
The GCV. Yeah, that might be the single most confusing and defining aspect of this project right now. The core team is trying to push this internal consensus value for the coin at this absolutely extraordinary number, $314,159.
$314,000 per coin.
Per coin, yeah. The number, obviously, it's derived from the mathematical constant pi. It's meant to somehow reflect the coin's utility within their system.
But that's astronomical. Why insist on a value pulled from a math constant when the actual market is screaming something completely different? If the market price is like 25 cents and they're claiming over $300,000, the GCV is what, more than 1 million times higher than the trading price, not just 1,000. Let me check.
Yeah.
Yes, over 1 million times.
It's an absurd disparity. The goal seems to be trying to anchor perceived value within their own community, maybe keep people engaged. But the gap is just so enormous, it breeds confusion. It completely undermines any confidence in their economic model. It signals either a fundamental misunderstanding of basic economic supply, demand, real utility dictating price, or maybe a willful rejection of it. You simply can't dictate a price like that based on a math joke. The market ultimately decides value.
Okay, so if that valuation weirdness wasn't enough of a problem, the whole structure of the project seems to fly in the face of crypto's main selling point, decentralization. Let's talk about control.
Right. The centralization issue is, frankly, catastrophic for any project claiming to be a real blockchain or cryptocurrency. Get this. The core team controls over 93 billion of the total 100 billion tokens.
93 billion out of 100 billion. So they don't just have the majority, they have virtually the entire meaningful supply.
Exactly. It's not just being the biggest whale. It's like they are the ocean. And this lack of distribution, it fundamentally breaks the promise of decentralization.
How so? What is controlling 93% of the supply? What does that actually do to the network?
Well, it basically creates an autocracy, not a decentralized network. In a healthy crypto project, you have lots of independent nodes, right? Verifying transactions, securing the network. But in Pi Network's case, the leadership manages all the main nodes. So when one small group controls 93% of the coins and they control the entire validation infrastructure, well, the project just lacks the core features people expect from blockchain. Things like security through distribution, censorship resistance, genuine community governance. It's all compromised. It's sort of a blockchain in name only.
And even with all this time passed, even after an official mainnet launch, the token still doesn't have much legitimacy because it's not listed on any major exchanges. Right, like Binance or Coinbase. That must kill liquidity. Plus, the actual utility for most users still seems theoretical.
Yeah, the gap between the promise and the reality is probably sharpest right there. You look at what they intended. The sources talk about this huge marketplace they envisioned, like rivaling major e-commerce giants. Categories for everything. Automotive, kids' toys, electronics, mobile, services, work, even cosmetics, like an Amazon built on Pi. But the current reality, even after all these years, It's a project that lacks clear, verifiable function for the vast majority of its users, and it's crippled by that centralization we talked about. In fact, you can't easily trade it or use it anywhere significant.
Wow. Okay, so this mix of governance failure, extreme centralization, and this bizarre economic model,
hmm
it really feels like it's pointing in one direction. Let's look at the expert analysis. What are people predicting for Pi's future, say, over the next couple of years?
Yeah, the prevailing view is pretty pessimistic, unfortunately. Our sources suggest that 50% of analysts are predicting a total final collapse for Pi Network, and they think it'll happen sometime between 2026 and 2027. We're also seeing really sharp drops in liquidity metrics. Trading volumes have just plummeted. They were around $140 million daily at their peak, now down to maybe $43 million. And the consensus price prediction, likely to fall even further, probably settling into that really low range, maybe DDs up to 10 cents, 40 cents.
10 cents to 40 cents. Ouch.
Yeah.
And those regulatory risks we mentioned, they're not going away either, are they? They seem to be adding even more pressure.
They absolutely are. We've seen very specific, harsh warnings, like those issued in Vietnam explicitly stating a 90% risk of loss for anyone involved. The legal uncertainty about the token status just continues globally.
Yeah.
And when you add that to the severe warnings from China, calling it dangerous, the path to any kind of long-term stable viability looks exceptionally narrow. Very difficult.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. What does this whole Pi Network saga mean for you, the listener, the person trying to make sense of the crypto world? What's the core lesson, the really important takeaway from this story?
I think the Pi Network case is just a profound lesson in due diligence, and it applies everywhere in crypto, not just here. It really hammers home how critical it is to scrutinize the project leadership, the governance structure, before you even think about putting any capital in. You absolutely have to demand clear, transparent communication about funding, especially those early rounds, like that $20 million safety investment. Where did it go? What was it used for? And finally, you just have to be incredibly cautious with any project that launches without clear, undeniable, real-world utility, and crucially, decentralized token distribution. Doesn't matter how big or how enthusiastic the community seems initially, utility and decentralization are key.
Right. And here's where it's really interesting, kind of the final thought we want to leave you mulling over. That legal fight between the founders, it got settled confidentially in 2023. Okay. But we don't know the details. They're secret. Meanwhile, the core team still holds that unbelievable amount, 93 plus billion of the tokens. So given that ongoing lack of transparency, even after a major legal battle, what's the ultimate cost, the future cost of this kind of opacity in the crypto space? Pi Network is standing at a huge crossroad right now. Will they fundamentally change course? Will they prioritize real transparency, actual decentralization? Or will they keep going down this opaque path that, frankly, half their own community seems to predict will lead to collapse? The answer to that question, that's going to define Pi Network's final chapter.